Welcome to Business Book Breakdowns.
Great to be here.
You're tuned in to Business Book Breakdowns, the best ideas broken down so you can build up.
That's the plan.
So today, we're diving into what I think is one of the most intriguing and maybe, counterintuitive puzzles in business strategy. We're cracking open Clayton Christensen's landmark book, The Innovator's Dilemma.
A classic, and
Um,
still incredibly relevant.
Totally. This deep dive is all about trying to understand why even the most admired, seemingly best-run companies, the ones celebrated for being innovative, focused on their customers, why they can just inexplicably stumble, sometimes even fail completely when new technologies come along.
Right. And the real kicker, as you said, isn't that it's about bad management or like corporate laziness. Christensen argues it's often the exact opposite. Good management practices causing failure. It sounds crazy at first.
It really does. So, okay, let's unpack this. The book really challenges the usual thinking, doesn't it? It's not blaming bureaucracy or arrogance or, poor planning. Instead, it argues that these really well-managed companies, competitive antenna up, listening hard to customers, they still lose their market dominance. How?
Well, what's fascinating and kind of scary is that the very practices that make a company successful in its current market, like, as you said, listening closely to customers, investing aggressively in what they want, pushing for better performance, those things can become fatal traps when you're faced with a really different kind of technological change.
A different kind. Okay, so that distinction is key. Christensen talks about two types, sustaining and disruptive. Let's start with sustaining. My understanding is these are the improvements established companies are, brilliant at.
Absolutely. Sustaining technologies are all about continuous improvement, making good products better. Think of innovations that boost the performance of existing products along lines that your mainstream customers already care about. So, a hard drive with more gigabytes, insulin that's purer, a laser printer that spits out pages faster.
Right, the stuff customers are actually asking for.
Exactly. Leading firms pour resources into these. They're good at it. Their customers reward them for it. It's a positive feedback loop.
Okay, makes sense. And then there's the flip side, disruptive technologies. Now these, from what I recall, they sound almost, kind of unimpressive at first, almost counterintuitive to even bother with.
They absolutely do initially. Disruptive technologies, when they first appear, actually underperform established products on those traditional metrics that everyone cares about. They might be simpler, maybe cheaper. Often they offer lower profit margins. And critically, they tend to pop up in these emerging or, frankly, insignificant markets first.
Insignificant markets,
No.
so not where the big money is.
Not at all. Not at the start. They don't begin by wowing your existing, most profitable customers. Who do they appeal to? Maybe the least profitable customers, or sometimes entirely new groups of people who value different things. Maybe they care more about small size or convenience or how rugged it is or just that it's cheap rather than raw power, all the bells and whistles.
St. Christensen didn't just, dream this up. He did some serious digging, especially into the district industry. He called it a fast history because things change so quickly there. Markets, companies, tech, boom, boom, boom. So what did he find in that sort of high-speed laboratory?
Yeah, the disk drive industry was perfect for seeing this pattern play out quickly. He found this really striking, repetitive thing happening. Over 6 distinct cycles of major tech change in disk drives, only twice did the company that was dominant before the shift manage to stay dominant after. Only twice in 6 generations.
Wow, that's not a great track record for the incumbents.
Not at all. And what's truly fascinating is how they failed. The established firms always led the way in developing and adopting the sustaining innovations. Things like thin film heads, new architectures that improved capacity or speed, they were great at that. But consistently, every single time, they failed to lead when it came to the disruptive shifts, like the move to smaller disk sizes.
The smaller form factors.
Exactly. The 14-inch guys missed the 8-inch wave, the 8-inch guys missed the 5.25-inch, the 5.25 missed the 3.5. It was a relentless pattern.
So, okay, the established players kept missing these huge shifts, even though they were the leaders, the experts in their field. My first instinct is to think, well, maybe they just couldn't build the smaller ones. Maybe the tech was too different. Was that it? And that's the absolute crucial twist in the whole dilemma. It wasn't about a lack of technological capability, not usually anyway. The very companies making those huge, profitable 14-inch mainframe drives often could build the smaller ones. They frequently did build prototypes in their labs. They had the engineers, they had the R&D chops. So if they could build them, Why didn't they jump on them and dominate those new markets too?
Okay, yeah, that is the question. If capability wasn't the issue.
Exactly. This is where it gets really interesting because it points away from a technical failure and straight towards a strategic failure, a market-driven failure.
So the engineers could do it, but maybe the managers or the salespeople didn't want it. What held them back? Christensen talks about this powerful northeasterly pull, this idea that companies always tend to move towards higher performance, higher margin markets. Well, it's subtle. It's not typically some CEO saying, ignore the small stuff. It's deeply embedded in how companies allocate resources. Think about it. When managers get proposals for new projects, which ones look most attractive? The ones promising higher performance, better margins, targeting bigger known markets where your best customers are. Those get the green light. They get the resources, the best teams.
The safe bets, basically.
The rational bets. Imagine you're a middle manager. Do you champion a project for a tiny, uncertain market with potentially lousy margins? Or the one that improves your main product line for your biggest customer?
Yeah, one sounds like a promotion track, the other sounds risky.
Precisely. Christensen uses this analogy, like a boat captain always steering towards the richest fishing grounds, the known spots where the big fish are. They completely ignore those little obscure coves where maybe, just maybe, a whole new type of valuable fish is starting to appear, but it looks small and unfamiliar right now.
So they're just so focused on netting the big, profitable salmon, they don't even notice the first few, maybe smaller tuna swimming by in a different area.
That's a great way to put it. And when your whole business, your metrics, your incentives are built around catching salmon efficiently, it's incredibly hard to justify diverting resources to chase those weird little tuna.
And the examples he gives really drive this home. The disk drives again.
Right. The 14-inch drive makers. He described them as being held captive by their customers, their big mainframe computer customers. What did those customers want? More capacity, more speed, bigger, better 14-inch drives. They weren't asking for smaller, slower, less capacity 8-inch drives.
So the customers were actively pulling them away from the disruption.
Exactly, which meant the incumbents looked at the 8-inch, then the 5.25-inch, then the 3.5-inch drives, which were initially smaller, less capable, much cheaper, and thought, our customers don't want this. Why bother? And that, of course, opened the door wide for new companies, like Connor Peripherals back then, who targeted totally new markets the big guys couldn't even see, like portable computers.
And it wasn't unique to disk drives, right? This pattern showed up elsewhere.
Oh, yeah. Remarkably consistent across industries. He looked at mechanical excavators. The leading makers of big cable shovels were focused on making bigger, more powerful machines for large-scale digging. Made sense. They initially dismissed hydraulic backhoes. Those were simpler, weaker at first, but turned out to be way better for digging narrow trenches, like for pipes and cables. A whole new application.
A market the big shovels couldn't really serve well.
Right. Or look at integrated steel mills. Huge businesses focused on high-quality, high-margin sheet steel for cars and appliances. They happily let mini-mills take the low-end market for rebar or reinforcing bars for concrete. Mini-mills used a different, cheaper technology, initially lower quality.
The big guys thought, let them have the cheap stuff, we don't want those low margins anyway.
Exactly. They saw no economic sense in competing at the bottom, seeding the ground for the mini-mills to eventually improve and move up market.
So, this really flips that old business advice, stay close to your customers, completely on its head. You're saying in these disruptive situations, listening too closely to your current best customers can actually be a fatal mistake? That just feels so wrong.
It feels incredibly counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Right.
But that's the heart of the paradox. Your mainstream customers, by their very nature, pull you towards sustaining innovations. They want improvements to the product they already use in ways they already value. They offer zero guidance. Or worse, they actively mislead you when it comes to disruptive changes. Why? Because those disruptive products initially just don't meet their needs.
Your best customers, the ones paying the bills, will look at the early disruptive thing and say, nah, that's not good enough for me.
Precisely. They reject it. And that feedback goes back into the incumbent company and basically confirms the internal bias. See, nobody important wants this thing. It's not worth pursuing.
And what's really striking, I think, is that this isn't necessarily about some clueless CEO making bad calls from the top floor. The decisions that effectively kill these disruptive projects often happen much lower down, almost invisibly, just through people making rational choices day to day.
That's absolutely right. It's the resource allocation process itself. From the engineer deciding which prototype to spend extra time on, to the product manager deciding which features to prioritize, to the mid-level manager deciding which business case to push upstairs. The whole system is naturally biased towards projects with assured market demand, clear financial returns, serving existing customers, which almost always means sustaining innovations.
Because backing a project that fails because the market wasn't there, that's not great for your career.
It can be a killer.
Mm.
So it's not usually malice or incompetence. It's the system itself, the rational processes and values that make the company successful today that make it nearly impossible for truly disruptive ideas to get the oxygen they need internally.
Okay, so if the problem is that you can't really analyze a market that doesn't exist yet, how on earth do you plan for it? This brings us to Christensen's first principle for actually succeeding with disruption. Markets that don't exist can't be analyzed. How do companies deal with that fog?
Well, the key insight is that your plans for disruptive tech can't be about execution in the traditional sense. They have to be plans for learning and discovery. Because any detailed forecast you make about the market size, the application, the price point for a truly disruptive technology is almost guaranteed to be wrong.
So projecting 5 years out for a disruptive product is basically fantasy.
Pretty much. Look at HP's Kitty Hawk drive. Remember that tiny 1.3-inch drive? It was a cool piece of engineering, but it was designed based on forecasts for a big PDA market personal digital assistants that just didn't materialize the way HP expected. And the features they built in, like a really good shock sensor for mobile use, made it too expensive for the markets that did actually emerge for tiny drives. Then things like cash registers, industrial scanners, even video games.
So they bet big on a specific prediction, and when that prediction was off, the product didn't fit the real opportunity.
Exactly. They spent too much assuming their forecasts were right, rather than launching it cheaply and seeing where it actually gained traction, treating it as an execution plan, not a learning experiment.
Okay, so what's a better way? You mentioned learning.
Well, contrast HP's Kitty Hawk story with, say, Honda entering the U.S. motorcycle market. Their initial plan was to sell big, powerful highway bikes, competing head-on with Harley and Triumph. And they struggled badly. Where did their unexpected breakthrough come from? Their little 50cc Super Cub motorbike, a classic disruptive product, simple, cheap, low performance.
The one you wouldn't expect to succeed against Harleys.
Right. But some Honda employees started riding them for fun, off-road in the hills around L.A., just messing around. And suddenly Honda stumbled upon this whole new market segment, recreational dirt biking, something they hadn't planned for at all. They learned by doing it, by accident almost.
Serendipity.
Yes. Or think about Intel with microprocessors early on. They didn't have some grand strategy for the PC market. They basically sold chips to whoever would buy them for calculators, traffic lights, whatever. Their own internal forecasts, even after the IBM PC took off, didn't see PCs as the dominant application for years.
Wow, even Intel didn't fully grasp it initially.
It points to what Christensen calls agnostic marketing. You have to assume that nobody really knows what the market for a disruptive innovation is until you actually try things out. And crucially, that means you need to conserve resources. Don't bet the farm on the first try. Plan for multiple iterations, multiple attempts to find that market.
Okay, that makes sense. Plan for learning, be agnostic, conserve resources. That leads nicely into the second principle, which also sounds kind of weird. An organization's capabilities define its disabilities. How can the things you're good at actually hold you back? Your strengths become weaknesses.
Yeah, this connects directly back to what we're saying about resource allocation and internal processes. When Christensen talks about capabilities, he says they're not just about your resources, your people, your cash, your tech patents. Those things are often quite flexible. You can hire people, raise money, license tech.
Right, resources can be moved around.
The real inflexibility, the part that creates the disability when faced with disruption, lies in two other things: a company's processes and its values. Processes are the established ways work gets done consistently, how products are designed, how they're manufactured, how they're sold, how budgets are approved. Think routines, systems. And values are the criteria the company uses to prioritize decisions. What kinds of margins are acceptable? How big does a market opportunity need to be to get attention? What's strategically important?
And those things, processes and values, are much harder to change than just reassigning engineers.
Much, much harder. They're deeply ingrained in the culture and structure. Think about DEC, Digital Equipment Corporation, and the PC revolution. DEC had all the resources needed to compete in PCs. They had brilliant engineers, plenty of cash, a strong brand name from their mini-computer success.
So resources weren't the problem.
No. But their processes were all wrong for the PC market. They had long design cycles. They insisted on making most components in-house. They used a direct sales force suited for selling expensive mini computers, not cheap PCs, through retailers. And their values demanded the high profit margins they were used to getting from mini computers. They literally couldn't make the PC business model make sense within their existing structure.
So their very success in mini computers, their established processes and values, made them incapable of succeeding in PCs, even though they had the tech talent.
Exactly. Their capabilities defined their disabilities in that new context.
Which really highlights a huge problem for big, successful companies, doesn't it? How do they possibly pursue these small, uncertain, disruptive opportunities when they need massive growth just to satisfy investors and keep their stock price up? A tiny little market for some weird new product. It's barely a rounding error for a giant corporation.
That is precisely the challenge, and it leads directly to Christensen's third principle. You have to match the size of the organization to the size of the opportunity. Think about it. A $4 billion company needs, say, 20% growth. That means finding $800 million in new revenue next year. Now, along comes a disruptive technology, creating a potential market that might be worth maybe $40 million in its first few years.
Yeah, $40 million doesn't solve the $800 million problem. It's just not interesting enough for the mainstream business.
Exactly. It won't get the resources. It won't get the top management attention. It'll probably get starved or crushed by the existing processes and values demanding bigger returns faster. So what's the solution Christensen points to? Often, it's creating independent, small organizations whose scale matches the small scale of the initial disruptive market.
Spinouts or separate divisions, giving the disruptive idea its own space to grow.
Precisely. Let it develop its own processes, its own cost structure, its own values that fit the new market without being smothered by the parent company's expectations.
And there are some really clear historical examples where companies did this right and others where they failed by not doing it.
Absolutely. Think about Krej, the old variety store chain, going into discount retailing. They didn't try to make their existing Krej stores into discount stores. They created Kmart as a completely separate entity. New brand, new management team, new processes, new locations. They even eventually wound down the old Krej business. They committed fully to the new model in a separate structure.
Okay, and the counterexample.
Woolworth. They tried to launch their discount chain, Woolco, but they kept it managed within the existing Woolworth variety store structure. They forced Woolco to adopt higher margins and fit into the old ways of doing things. It didn't work. Woolco ultimately failed because it wasn't allowed to be truly disruptive and independent.
That's a stark contrast. Any other examples?
Hewlett-Packard with printers is a great one. They had the hugely successful LaserJet business. Then along comes inkjet technology, disruptive, lower cost, different performance. Instead of trying to make the LaserJet division develop inkjets, where it might have been seen as a threat or unimportant, HP set up a separate autonomous division way up in Vancouver to focus solely on inkjet.
So it could develop its own different cost structure and market focus without interference.
Exactly. It allowed inkjet to compete, even against HP's own LaserJet division, and find its own path. Allen Bradley, the big motor controls company, did something similar when electronic controls started disrupting their traditional electromechanical business. They acquired smaller electronic control companies, but kept them separate, letting them operate independently.
And Johnson & Johnson is famous for this model too, right?
Yes, J&J's strategy often involves launching potentially disruptive medical products through very small, often acquired autonomous companies. They provide resources and support, but they let these small units stand alone, find their market, and develop their own business model without being crushed by the weight of the larger J&J organization.
It seems like creating that separation, that independence, is crucial for letting these disruptive seeds actually sprout.
It really does. It protects them from the resource allocation processes and values of the mothership, which are inevitably geared towards the established business.
You know, this whole framework, it isn't just looking back at history. It feels like it has real predictive power for things happening right now. The electric vehicle market seems like a perfect unfolding example of the innovator's dilemma today.
It really does, doesn't it? You see many of the big traditional automakers struggling. They're trying to sell EVs into the mainstream market, directly competing with their own gasoline cars. Think about trying to launch, say, an electric minivan aimed at the exact same families buying gas minivans today.
Right, and they often frame it as needing a massive battery breakthrough before EVs can truly compete.
Exactly. They're trying to make a potentially disruptive technology fit a sustaining technology mold. They're demanding it meet or beat gasoline cars on all the traditional metrics right away. Hundreds of miles of range, super fast refueling, maybe high performance.
Which, according to Christensen's theory, is the wrong way to approach a disruption.
It likely is. A different approach, one aligned with disruptive theory, would be to stop trying to make EVs beat gasoline cars at their own game initially. Instead, you'd look for markets where the EV's current characteristics, even the perceived weaknesses like limited range or maybe slower acceleration, were actually acceptable, or even strengths.
Okay, like what kind of markets? Where is limited range okay?
Well, think about low-speed urban delivery fleets. Predictable routes, lots of stopping and starting, maybe overnight charging is fine. Range anxiety isn't a big issue there.
Hmm.
Or specialized short-range vehicles, campus security cars, maintenance vehicles, maybe second cars for city commuting. Or niche applications where quiet operation or instant torque is more valuable than 0 to 60 times.
So find the niches where the current limitations don't matter as much, or where the unique benefits shine.
Precisely. And crucially, target a lower, more accessible price point for these initial markets. Don't load them up with features to try and match a high-end gas car. This is how disruptive technologies typically gain a foothold. They start in these overlooked niches, build volume, improve the technology, lower costs, and then start migrating upmarket to challenge the incumbents in their core markets.
So the path for EVs might not be about waiting for the perfect battery, but about finding the right initial markets where today's batteries are good enough.
That would certainly be the prediction from the Innovator's Dilemma framework. Start small, start different, serve overlooked needs.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. The Innovator's Dilemma.
Mhm.
It's really not a story about companies being badly managed or making obviously stupid decisions. It's almost the opposite. It's about being too good at managing the current business, at doing the things that lead to success today. But those very things, listening intently to your best customers, allocating resources rationally towards profitable, sustaining innovations, maintaining healthy margins, can paradoxically pave the road to failure when a disruptive change hits.
It's a tough pill to swallow. The things that get you rewarded, the things that define good management in a stable environment, become liabilities in a disruptive one. You're essentially blinded to the future by your current success. And really raises a fundamental question, not just for big companies, but maybe for all of us, even in our careers. How do you make sure you're not sacrificing your future growth, your ability to adapt, by clinging too tightly to what has always worked? What are the things your current best customers, maybe your boss, your current role's demands are asking of you today that might be blinding you to different opportunities down the road?
Oof, that's a challenging thought. Are your current capabilities defining your future disabilities? Wow. Well, what a fascinating deep dive today into the innovator's dilemma. Really makes you think differently about success and failure. If this breakdown has sparked your curiosity and you want to explore Clayton Christensen's groundbreaking insights even further, you can purchase the book through the link we've included in the description. Your support really helps the channel keep breaking down these incredible ideas so you can build up.
It's definitely a book worth reading and rereading.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for tuning in to Business Book Breakdowns. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into the ideas